everyone, welcome to Adventures for the Curious. My name is Mindy, and today we will be looking at a famous poem with strong fantasy elements. But first, if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button and ring the notifications bell so you'll know the moment my next video is released. John Keats was an English romantic poet. Born in 1795, the young Keats knew early on he wanted to be a poet, but his father wanted him to become a surgeon, so Keats was trained as one. But after a while, he grew tremendously unhappy with that career choice and decided he would become a poet or die. That's very poetic, isn't it? Well, it turns out he would do both. He died of tuberculosis at the young age of 25. At that time, he had been writing poems for 4 years. Although his poems were not generally well received by critics during his lifetime, his reputation grew after his death. And by the end of the 19th century, he had become one of the most beloved of all English poets. La Belle Dame sans Merci is one of my favorite Keats poems. In my opinion, I believe the poem is somewhat autobiographical, as it wasn't written too long before his death. The knight in the poem looks pale and haggard, probably much as Keats looked as he was suffering from the ravages of tuberculosis. Many scholars believe the elfin woman in the poem is symbolic of his real-life love, Fanny Brawn, and this poem is his way of saying that he would never abandon her, no matter how close to death he came. I also love the poem for its elements of fantasy. Elves, fairies, and all things fantasy are enchanting to me. I grew up reading fantasy novels, and some of my favorites were from an age long past, like The Well at World's End by William Morris. La Belle Dame sans Merci reminds me of Marion Zimmer Bradley's interpretation of the Arthurian legend, The Mists of Avalon, which was one of my favorite books. Probably still is one of my favorite books. So, let's read the poem together, because poetry is still important, and poems should never be forgotten. Ah, what can ail thee, wretched wight, alone and palely loitering? The sedge is withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Ah, what can ail thee, wretched wight, so haggard and so woe-begone? The squirrel's granary is full, and the harvest done. I see a lily on thy brow, with anguish moist in fever dew, and on thy cheek a fading rose, fast withereth too. I met a lady in the meads, full beautiful, a fairy's child. Her hair was long, her foot was light, and her eyes were wild. I set her on my pacing steed, and nothing else saw all day long. For sideways would she lean, and sing a fairy song. I made a garland for her head, and bracelets too, and fragrant zone. She looked at me as she did love, and made sweet moan. She found me roots of relish sweet, and honey wild, and manna dew, and sure in language strange she said, I love thee true. She took me to her elfin grot, and there she wept and sighed full sore, and there I shut her wild, wild eyes with kisses four. And there she lulled me asleep, and there I dreamed, ah, woe betide, the latest dream I ever dreamt, on the cold hillside. I saw pale kings and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La Belle Dame sans Merci hath thee in thrall. I saw their starved lips in the gloam, with horrid warning gaped wide, and I awoke and found me here on the cold hill's side. And this is why I sojourn here, alone and palely loitering, though the sage is withered from the lake, and no birds sing.